Okay, so good afternoon. Thanks for joining our next session in Accelerator Program, our CEVA Batch 2 Accelerator Program. So far, we have talked about innovation and value proposition, market identification analysis. So we have looked at developing an innovative product that solves a painful customer problem. And we talked about how important that is in creating or in not exactly guaranteeing, but helping to suggest that there will be sufficient demand for a product. We have looked at selecting a market that is of sufficient size to support our scalability aspirations. And we have also looked in the last session at market entry strategies. So selecting an optimal market niche to enter the market through. And we are now at the point where we want to look at the competitive analysis and strategy that we will employ in this market entry strategy. So today, that's my topic for today. I call this competitive analysis and strategy. So I'm going to cover basically marketing strategy and also what I call sustainable competitive advantage. So marketing strategy, I think everybody knows what is a marketing strategy in our group, what are the components of marketing strategy and elements of marketing strategy. Key elements are fundamental strategy, so differentiation. How is our product better than competition? And what will be the foundation of our strategy? Will we be providing a better or superior product or customer experience? Or will we be focused on cost leadership? Our positioning, which is combining or looking at the intersection of our market selection and our differentiation strategy, and also the image that our product embodies those values, and basically the mind space that we'll occupy with our customers, and our position in the competitive landscape. And then our marketing execution strategy, which is 4 Ps plus S and FS here, but product pricing, place, promotion, and sales, which obviously are critically important for a startup company. So just to look at the first one for a minute, we will actually, I think generally there's only 3 marketing strategies that we can use. One is 3 decisions we have to make. One is, should we be broad-based or focused? So should we be focusing on targeting mass market or niche market? I don't even include that in our list here because I think this decision is already made. As a startup, we need to be focused. We very rarely see successful startups that are targeting mass markets because this requires large investment in human resources and capital, which startups won't have. So the chances of us succeeding as a startup with mass market strategy is effectively 0. So we'll always have a targeted, focused marketing strategy with goal 1 of our strategy to identify the right niche to enter, and then goal 2, capture that niche, own that niche, and then move on to the next niche. We'll do this until we agree on enough niches that we reach some critical mass. So this leaves us basically with only one decision. Do we want to focus on superior customer value or cost leadership? Meaning, do we want to provide a better product for customers? Do we want to be the cost leader in our market? So I think better product or superior customer value is self-explanatory. But what about cost leadership? What does it mean if we are to adopt a cost leadership strategy? How does that work?
The software strategy is kind of niche market strategy.
Yeah. So that's why, since we assume that we're going to focus on a niche, so we don't even include that as a choice here. But we do have a choice We do have a choice like better or cost leadership. After we talk about this, I'm going to go through one strategy that we can use to actually be both, which is, I think, that a unique opportunity we have as innovation-driven startups. But let's just start with what's the difference. So what is a cost leadership strategy? What does that mean?
Very expensive strategy.
Lowering the cost and lowering the barrier of entry.
The cost for
Acquiring customer.
Yeah, consumers.
Operation.
So usually cost leadership means what?
Well, okay, so if you take the cost leadership from, like border fire line, he's talking about consumers, right? So you're supposed to provide products and services for a cheaper offer.
This is not what it is.
All right, so what do you mean by cost leadership?
Because actually, I think this strategy can never work, especially for startups,
That's what I'm saying, it's a very expensive.
and doomed to fail. Because actually, what cost leadership to me means cost to whom? Not to customers.
So that's the point, right? Essentially, if you want to have a cost leadership, okay, for a consumer, if we start from that angle, okay, that means that you actually have to have a cost leadership in your own organization and provide cost leadership also to different suppliers.
In order
So
to
the whole supply chain needs to be tuned, and the whole processes and procedures needs to be tuned to take the most advantage in order for you to be able to reduce the price for your customers.
okay, I would take it. I get that, but I would take a different view. I would say cost leadership means we are the low cost producer. So we win because we're the low cost producer. Now, that means that we can produce a product at a lower cost than competitors. Now, if we accompany that strategy with a price cutting strategy, then actually we lose the value of being the cost leader. Because the long-term value of being the cost leader is we can have a more profitable business than competitors. So if we just, let's say we accompany our cost leadership by slashing price, actually we give up a lot of potential value. So for me, as generally cost leadership, I would look at, we will be the low cost producer. If we have, and actually think about it, let's say we have 4 companies that are all trying to compete on offering the lowest price to customers. Who's going to win that battle in the long run is the low cost producer, because he can always cut the price below anybody else and still not go to business, but they're not going to be able to do that. So I think for us, we want to, if we have a cost advantage, I wouldn't just give that back in terms of, or give that away by losing any margin. So we might be able to derive from that. But is that clear why? Like, let's say,
So you're saying the business model itself has to support the cost leadership.
we have to have some way to derive the cost leadership. Hopefully this is part of our innovation. Hopefully, like, we have an innovative process, or we have an innovative material, or we have innovative something that enables us to reduce costs. Report. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, if you look like, and I'm sorry I'm going back there, if you look at the, what we call the value chain, and that's relates to every business, right? But every business, there's a value chain. So there's inbound logistics, there's operations, there's outbound logistics, there's marketing, sales, there's service, all these kind of things, and there's also support functions. Essentially, in order to really maintain cost leadership, you actually need to make sure that you have a cost leadership in all 3 of these areas. Because each one of them is supposed to add value to your product, but if its cost is going to be over the value that you actually add, basically means that specific activity takes a lot of money out of your business. So you have really to tune your whole organization, meaning you could have an operation that's provided very, very low cost production. But if your logistics is going to be very, very expensive, that will undermine all your cost savings, right? That's one of the reasons why startups are basically bound to fail in cost leadership, because they actually have to have a lot of money to make sure that they can actually provide this cost leadership through innovation.
Now, okay, I agree with that, but I'm actually going to talk in a little while about a strategy that enables us as a startup to be both providing superior customer value and cost leadership.
It's not going to be interesting.
Yeah, listen, you probably
I've rarely seen it actually working.
Yeah, but I'll give some examples also. But but maybe you heard of it anyway, called the Blue Ocean Strategy. So, Blue Ocean. Yeah. So we'll look at how does that relate to this. Okay. So, yeah, anyway, big picture of our marketing strategy. So these are my marketing strategy questions.
Well, we got one more chair.
I think we have a chair in front of me. That's all we need to put the back. Oh, shoot. Okay. Yeah, I can just shift around.
And you can shift the chair
Without taking any cables out.
instead of charging.
One moment. Okay, so these are my marketing strategy questions. Each section we have a set of questions. So this is the set of questions that I like to see addressed in the marketing strategy section of our plan. Starting with our product differentiation, market position, price, place, product promotion, initial sales plan, and tagline. So I'll go through each of these now in a little more detail. This is a comparison matrix that I find very useful to include in a business plan or investor presentation. It's a very simple but effective way of communicating quickly a lot of information about how our product is better than competitor products. So in this example, you can see our product is on the right side, my right side. Competitor products are arrayed in columns. The benefits or features that are important to customers are on the y-axis, so making up the rows. And we can see that just by quickly looking at this diagram, you get a very pretty detailed understanding of where are we on, let's say, product feature differentiation for our competitors. The way that you read this chart, if one of the cells has a full circle, that means that the product has this benefit to the fullest degree. If the cell has an empty circle, it means the product is missing this benefit. If the cell has a partially filled circle, it means that the product has this benefit to some degree. So you can see that our product has all 6 most important benefits for customers to the full degree. Our closest competitor is competitor 4. Now in the real matrix, I would like to see the real name of the company here. We can also see pretty quickly from this diagram that benefit 1 is the key differentiator, and I guess in most cases, or most likely, this is our innovation. And benefit 2 and 4 also, we have some advantage over competitor 4. So sometimes people do these charts with text inside the cells, but I think that defeats the whole purpose of this diagram. Once you put text inside the cells, you can look at the diagram as a whole and understand how the product compares. So it's really important to element of this diagram is that it's done with graphical elements so that we can quickly at one glance see how we're different. Now, some mistakes that I see companies use in these diagrams, one is they have, let's say, every company and every benefit is blank, except for them. So this is not realistic because either they have way too carefully selected benefits or they have way too carefully selected companies, and they're not getting a true look at what's the competition really like in this market. Along the same lines, like if benefit 6 was a solid dot, then what would that suggest about the benefit 6? What's that? Yeah, we should just remove it because no longer differentiation. And the same thing, if competitor 1 was all empty circles, then they're probably not a real competitor, and we should take them out. So Another mistake I see sometimes in these diagrams is that, not exactly in the diagram, but related to the diagram, is entrepreneurs will confuse feature differentiation, which is what we see here, with sustainable competitive advantage. So, which we're going to cover in a little while. So, to me, feature differentiation, it's not sustainable competitive advantage unless the feature differentiation is very difficult to replicate, which again takes it beyond the realm of just differentiation. Why? Let's say you have a product feature, but actually it's not that difficult for competitors to copy. Then it's not sustainable competitive advantage, it's just a current differentiation. Now, what else? Let's say if we show this diagram to an investor, what questions do you think we should be ready to answer when we show this diagram?
How can you prove that?
What's that?
How can you prove that you have this benefit? So how do you prove that you're better than your competitor?
What if an investor looks at this diagram, which is showing how you compare to competitors. What do you think? I believe that there's some question, at least one or two questions that every investor is going to ask when they look at this exact comparison, the comparison that I'm showing.
How did they came up with the benefits?
Let's say that's a general question for any diagram like this. I mean, this scenario. This scenario that we're diagramming here.
Well, I would like to know whether they come up with these specific benefits.
Yeah.
But for example, are there any benefits that the others have that I basically haven't mentioned them?
Yeah,
And these benefits provide them much better.
Yeah, I think that's a good general question for any comparison matrix. So what about this exact scenario, this market scenario? Assume this is the real market. This is the real market. What questions might investors come up with right away looking at this that you should be ready to answer?
So like how long will it take, I don't know, competitor number 4, for example, how far are they from you? Like, what's going to be their reaction, for example?
Yeah, I mean,
how may they react?
I think that's right. Like, I think they would want to know how hard is it for competitor 4 to replicate benefit 1? Because this is really the only thing separating you from competitor 4.
Yeah.
So in this case, it better be the case that the answer is it's very difficult for competitor 4 to replicate benefit 1. And also, I want to know how important is benefit 1? Like, since that's really your only clear differentiation over competitor 4, how important is benefit 1 to customers? Now, it seems like benefit 1 is probably highly innovative because none of the other competitors have it. So how long is that likely to last? And how important is that benefit to customers? I think are some 2 obvious questions you're going to get from this scenario. And then, yes, also the other 2 questions, like how did you derive these benefits? And also, are there other benefits that are not shown where competitors are better than you? So this is a pretty common question about this diagram. Should we include benefits where we are behind? Meaning, should we include what are the advantages that customers have, that competitors have over us? My view is I wouldn't go out of my way to do that unless it's unavoidable, unless everybody knows this and we're going to look really deceptive by not showing it. But if there's no clear reason to do that, I would leave it out, but I would be prepared to answer questions about it. I think psychologically, I don't want to show, a balanced chart here where we look pretty much even with all the competition. We're not a market analyst writing a market report. We're trying to sell. So I didn't want to focus on areas where we're strong, but we should also be prepared to discuss that if investors want to know more about it or have
if the investors have less knowledge or probably no knowledge about the industry, so how can they compare it?
good, and we're in good shape. We're in good shape on that dimension. Now this can become a problem in other areas, like they don't understand the industry and they might therefore miss important things. But in terms of comparison, we should be okay. Now, okay, here's a question that comes up a lot when you get to this level, or when you do something like this. So, how about you show this diagram, and you have these 4 competitors, and you're much better than them. And then you get a question from investors like this. What about competitor 5, who you have left off this diagram, who actually has everything that you have and more, and is already much further along than you? So now, what's an effective answer to that question? How do you deal with that question? And this comes up a lot. So what about competitor 5? How come they're not on here, and they happen to have a superior, same or superior product to you, and they're further?
Usually not compete with them directly, but in a different product segment.
Okay, so that's good. That can be one approach. If you're able to make that argument convincingly, then that's one way to go. They're not a direct competitor. They're not an actual competitor. They're indirect competitor, or actually they're a potential partner or customer or something. What else?
If it's not on there, then the scenario comes down to 2 things. Either I purposefully left it out because I know that it should be left out. I can squeeze it. Or I don't know about the competitor. If I don't know about the competitor, then it's going to be hard to answer the question because I didn't do my comparison analysis very well.
I agree. So if you don't know the competitor, if you don't know that competitor and the investor's actually correct, meaning they are a real competitor with a real product, then you're finished. Then that presentation is already done. Just, you have to do the rest of the presentation just for completeness, but you're never going to get that, because that will have totally eliminated investors' confidence.
Fatal flaw.
Fatal flaw. So what do we do when that happens? What should we do? How to deal with that? This should never happen, because you know all the competition.
Okay.
Right? You walk into every pitch. This never happens to you because you walk into every pitch knowing all the competition. And of course, this is it should go without saying, but it's worth just repeating, because investors expect that you are intimately acquainted with all potential competition, all actual and potential competition. So this means we have to really do the homework, and not just, and also, okay, one mistake I see sometimes, like, not just in the Vietnam market. So, or not just in the local markets. It's not enough that we know the competition in the local market. We have to know the competition in the regional market and the global market. Because if you miss a huge competitor in the regional market, you only know the competitors in the local market, then this undermines confidence in your ability to expand this business beyond the local market. And if you, let's say you don't know about the international competitors, then the next question is, what happens when they come to the local market? What have you done to prepare for that? Or how are you going to beat them in the local market? And then, the answer like, oh, we don't think they're coming, or they're not going to come, it's usually not very compelling. So definitely we have to know about the competition.
What if the competition is like, okay, they have all those benefits, but they are too small to be noticed?
You mean they're smaller than you?
Yeah, it's either like it's as small as ours, or just a little bit further ahead.
I would try to.
From zeros, how can you compare like that?
I would try to know other startups that are in similar space to you. As, in real life, of course, it's impossible to know everybody. And it could also, I believe it's also the case that if an investor cites a really obscure and insignificant startup as a competitor and you don't know it, then probably they're not going to, it won't be that, deal ending move that I talked about before. But if it's any sort of real or credible competitor, then yes, you're a big problem. Another version of this is when we talk about competition, sometimes entrepreneurs will say, I hear entrepreneurs say, we have no competition, which is also a potential deal ending statement.
One of the reasons is that many think about the past, but what happens many look at what they do and they say nobody is actually doing the same thing. Your main competition in this specific situation is how people do things now. So the way they were doing things, right, is still a competition, or substitute as well, right? So, but that's the biggest thing when people say there's no competition. Basically, what it actually means is like, okay, how do you convert them from what they're doing now to using your solution?
It's like
usually for
projector can be a competitor to an LCD screen, right? Showing something.
Kind of, or you could call it a substitute in a way. But no, LCD and projector is the same thing. But what you want to look at it is like you came up with the first projector, but I don't know if you remember that, maybe you had at the school, the big projectors that you put this transparent thing, and that shows it, right? So it's not even computerized, right? So when you get with these things with computers, you have to convince people to use the new technology instead of what they used for, how many years was that? 40 years people were using overhead projection, right?
Yeah.
Is that a legitimate metric?
Oh yeah, I mean, we need to know about both direct and indirect competitors. Direct competitors are producing similar products. Yours, although they don't have to be the same, and indirect competitors provide substitute products, including the way people are doing things today. So, for example, like our system is it's a software as a service that automates, puts online a process that people are currently using spreadsheet for. But then people using spreadsheet is competition. Although Microsoft's not selling that spreadsheet as competition, but you are competing with the method of using a spreadsheet to do this. And also, if there's really let's say nobody's doing exactly what you're doing, but you should also know who could easily do that. Who is in an adjacent space that could move very quickly into this market. So I think you always want to be over paranoid about competition, not polite about competition. Not we have no competition. You want to, an entrepreneur, you want to see competition behind every rock and tree. Not just competition, but dangerous competition.
I can give you some other example. I used to use with my students, and actually work with exactly, but how many of you have a washing machine at home? It's practically nearly everybody, right? How many of you have a dishwasher at home? Okay, these American house is a dishwasher. Yeah, right? But then what's the main point? The main point is that if somebody comes with a dishwasher, it's a whole new product in Vietnam. It was never there. You don't have any competition.
Yeah.
But the economy means that the housewife or whatever thinks about how long does it take me to make dishes, and should I pay that much money for a dishwasher? Basically, so the last 10 years you have dishwashers in Vietnam, hardly anybody has one, right? Yeah. But in the washing machine, basically, the benefit of so much higher, so the substitute basically disappears. Right? And sometimes you even have to go completely in different way. Like, what is the substitute for a Coke? Pepsi's competition. What is the substitute for a Coke? And then, and then what you actually have to think about, why do people actually use Coke? And it could be for different reasons. Like, for example, you want to stay awake because it has caffeine, you can drink coffee, right? You want to really focus on what you're doing, you're going into exam, so you may have a Mars bar. So even a Mars bar could be a substitute for Coke.
Or Adderall.
Oh yeah, so whatever. The thing is that you really have to get into the mind of the consumers why they use their products, and then you can figure out basically who is going to be your substitutes, right? That's a very important point. If you miss that, basically you may actually misunderstand your consumers completely, and that could be a
Agreed. Okay, so that's our product feature differentiation. Now I want to look at positioning. So positioning is quite different from the product differentiation. So in positioning, we're looking at our market space. So what space are we occupying in the market? In this case, I have taken a simple view of positioning, looking at a two-dimensional positioning map where we have selected two key features in this product market that are important to customers. The two key features are, in this map, value and portability. So this is not done for a specific product, but you can imagine that this is done for, let's say, portable computer, a laptop computer. So customers highly value portability, meaning the form factor, the size, and the weight. So here on the left side of this axis, we would see large, thick, heavy portable computers. On the right side, we would see small and light and highly portable computers. At the top of the value axis here, we would see inexpensive, and at the bottom of the value axis, we would see expensive. So we can read this as this company produces expensive and not that expensive heavy computers. Here, inexpensive big and heavy computers. Here, moderately priced and reasonably portable computers. Here, highly portable but expensive computers. And then there's us. So we produce highly portable yet inexpensive computers. Now, why are we able to do that? Presumably our innovation. So in this market, we have a process innovation that enables us to very low cost produce highly portable computers.
But you're talking about expensive, but you have your value.
Yeah.
So value actually, like, iPhone, okay, when it came to the market, right?
Oh yeah.
So it definitely was there, but it was very expensive, but providing a lot of value.
Yeah, here is this diagram is using value as the inverse of price. So, because why? Actually, there's a reason for that. I don't want to say cheap and expensive, because if my product is cheap, I don't want to present it as cheap.
High cost and low cost, is that?
Yeah, so
value for $1, right?
yeah, so it's it's just an example, but I'm trying to avoid saying inexpensive or cheap because that can have some negative connotations. So okay, so yeah, now when we see this diagram, we can learn a couple of things about this company's positioning in the market. One thing we see is they have entered an empty segment, so this is good. An empty quadrant, and this is good because this is consistent with our overall market entry strategy of looking for segments center that are not subject to intensive competition as one of the features that we talked about in the last session makes a segment attractive for us to enter. Now, what else can we derive from this? Like, again, what would be questions? What questions might we expect from investors when they look at this diagram about, let's say, about your competitive position in the market?
I have a question first that might be relevant. What if competitor one is attacking a totally different market segment, like a mainframe computer, versus your company builds like smartphones?
Yeah, I think let's imagine that behind this we have selected companies who are real competitors.
So in the same market segment,
we pick these companies. So these should be companies who represent real competition to us. Oh, and by the way, the shape and size of the oval or the circle reflects a range. So when you see competitor 2 with a very wide oval, this means they span a range. range of formula. So who is, what's our most obvious competitive threat from looking at this position?
Does the distance reflect, like, is it really that far then?
I would say distance is like, okay, it's roughly correct. I wouldn't say it's that precise, but yeah, we can ascribe some information value to the distance.
It's a tricky question. I'll tell you this. If portability is easily achieved, okay, then, and also, then maybe competitor 4 or competitor 3 might be able to very quickly move to exactly where your company is, right? The same goes in terms of value, right? So the question is how easily will we achieve the same value as you are, and that will dictate who can move where and how quickly.
Okay, so what about, let's say, portability is not that easy to achieve.
Okay,
So both value and portability.
I mean, definitely, okay, let's say adding, increasing portability without increasing price, it's not easy, because that's our innovation.
Okay.
okay. Yeah. So in that case, I would say competitor 2, if indeed it can achieve the same value, and how confident is to achieve the same value.
Yeah, I agree. I think competitor 2 is the most obvious problem here. Why? Like, let's say maybe we don't know from this diagram what's the size of these companies or what are their product range. Let's say competitor 2 has a range of products, which actually they do, right? Because we see a range of different portability options. So maybe competitor 2 could start selling some of their offering at a loss. Actually, because they have plenty of products, and they don't mind like taking a hit on one of these products to crush our company before we become a real competitive threat. Right. So they might decide to start releasing some of their, like reducing the price on some of their products to challenge us in our space.
They already have that portability.
They already can do it, it's just they can't do it as cost effectively as us. So, okay, so that's a positioning, that's a simple look at positioning. Now I want to look at a more robust or more detailed way to do positioning.
Hold on. What would be the correct answer to that question?
Which one?
Would be easy for the 2 to lower the value, lower their price.
Oh,
match would be
oh, we don't know the answer to that from the diagram. My question was, what's the, from looking at the diagram, what company poses the most obvious threat? And I think it is competitor 2, based on information that we can derive from this diagram. Now, in real life, in real life, the way we respond to that is we would know why competitor 2 can't do that. So we would have thought about that before we present this and say, yeah. And so you can start to see a pattern in the way that we present information to investors. Before we present information to investors, we have already carefully thought through what are the most likely questions or objections we're going to get to the presentation that we're making, and we have formulated the answer. So we know what is the most likely set of questions and what are the answers that we're going to get. So in this case, we have already figured out, every investor that looks at this, they're going to say, what's the stop competitor 2 from releasing a low price version of their product into your quadrant here? And we're going to say, oh, but definitely competitor 2 cannot do that because XYZ, and we're going to know what are the XYZ reasons. Now, those will be specific to the case, but we will have thought through that already. And then, of course, if we want to do a really good job, then we will also have thought, how will investors object to that answer? Right? What are the likely objections to be raised when we answer that question, and then we'll have a second answer to that. So, I mean, for me, I was like, okay, unless the first answer to the question is airtight. Like, competitor 2 can never do this because it would let's say competitor 2 can never do this because they're an absolute premium brand and they can never release a low price version of the product, or they can never cut price on the product because it's total brand destruction. right? So, okay, that's one answer. But, okay, what would you say if you're an investor? How to challenge that? Oh,
Again,
Hello.
line of products. So they can just go about like creating a whole new line of products.
yeah, what if they just release maybe they'll set up a new, they can launch a new brand, with different positioning, but then you might say, but it doesn't make sense for them to do that for one product. They're never going to. Anyway, so unless, let's say, best case is we have an airtight answer to the question. If not, we should have a second round of answers also. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that as a what I call value innovation-driven startup, meaning startup that has developed an innovative product that solves a painful problem for a new customer segment or resegmented market, we have an opportunity to be both the low-cost producer and provide the highest value product for customers. So this is a very unusual situation, and we should leverage this as much as possible. Now, this material comes from something called a book called Blue Ocean Strategy. So, has everybody read that book? Yeah. So, before we go into detail, what's the symbolism of the blue ocean? Like when the authors of this book talk about competing in a blue ocean, what's the opposite ocean? Red ocean. So what's the difference between, why is the blue ocean blue and the red ocean red? What causes the red color in the red ocean? Is it algae? No. What is it?
It's like metal and red is like fish. It's like
Red is like what?
it's like we create the same value for same function to for the border market, and the blue ocean we create from combo and we don't have a direct competitor.
So okay, I agree, but what makes the red color? Blood. Yeah, the ocean
Yes.
in the red ocean, the water is red from blood. What causes the blood? Shark. It can be like the way I think about it is it's the blood of competition. So these red ocean markets are red because they're full of companies. They're jam-packed with companies who are fighting each other tooth and nail, tooth and claw, and tearing each other to pieces, and they're all bleeding into the water. Whereas the blue ocean is relatively empty, and there's plenty of room for us to swim without getting torn to shreds by shark teeth and claws. So, which is better? Blue or red? Blue. So, okay, now let's look at how we get into these blue ocean markets and how do they affect our position of. So in endeavoring to both provide the lowest cost, become the low cost producer and provide a higher value product for customers, we start by analyzing the existing market for our product or the competition for our product along what's called a value curve. And we create the value curve using factors of competition in the current market. So I'll show that in the next page to help us understand. But once we have identified what are the factors of competition in the current market, now we can decide which factors should be reduced, which new factors should we create, and this is like our innovation, which factors should we raise, which factors should we eliminate. So 4 choices. Now, we can better understand this by looking at one of these Blue Ocean Strategy Canvas which is the way we map the positioning, market positioning in this framework. So this is, you can see this is quite different from the 4-dimension that we looked at before, because here we have 8 dimensions, 9 dimensions, and theoretically we could have n dimensions. Of course, there's a limit to how many we can put on a diagram and have it easily readable. But in this case, we have 9 dimensions. So you see the competitive dimensions are along the x-axis. The y-axis shows the offering level of each of these factors of competition that are in the current market. Now, this strategy canvas is done for a company called Yellowtail. Now, who knows this company? What's their product?
Wine.
Wine.
Yes, please.
Not everybody gets that right away. See, we have very smart class. So I thought this was especially interesting choice of company because studying, about innovation and looking at a market like wine, you see it's still possible to innovate even in markets that are thousands of years old. So I think the wine market must be one of the oldest markets in the world. I think people have been producing and selling wine for probably 4,000 years or more. So, but we see that companies can still, in this market, come up with innovative strategies. So let's analyze that for a minute and see how this was accomplished by Yellowtail, and also what we learned from this and how we might apply to our own company. So we can see the structure of the market prior to the entrance of Yellowtail was there were 2 segments in the market. The market was segmented into premium wine and budget wine. Premium wine companies were competing by offering high levels of each of the existing factors of competition in the market at a high price. Budget wine companies were competing by offering medium to medium-low levels of each of the factors of competition at a low price. So we can derive pretty quickly from this diagram that neither one of these segments was very attractive. Both of these segments were extremely red ocean segments with cutthroat competition, either at a high price point or a low price point. So when Yellowtail, or when the founders of Yellowtail were looking at entering this market, what was the strategy that they used? Where did they get their customers from? Did they target customers of premium wine or customers of budget wine? Which segment did they focus on taking their initial customers from? Budget. So let's budget. Any other views? Budget because why? Why do you think budget?
Because the customers who buy budget wines expect the value, expect the cost to be lower, and they produce something that has other. If you look at the quality, you can see it's lower, so I can assume that it costs to be lower for them.
You mean the Yellowtail's price?
Yeah.
So Yellowtail is priced slightly above budget wine,
Right.
but below premium wine.
But it's very close to budget ones, closer than premium ones. Yeah.
Okay, so you think first proposition is that they tried to take customers from budget wine segment. Anybody else? Does anybody think premium wine segment? Or what are some other views?
I think they target a new customer, and the one who never drank wine before, but they willing to try. So they a new product that is easy to drink and quite affordable as well. So,
Yes, so this is correct. They did not target either the budget wine segment or the premium wine segment. They targeted a new segment. So they resegmented or redefined the market. We talked about that in marketing identification. So what was the new segment that they created? Or how did they create this new segment?
Because when I look at fun and adventure, ease of selection, and a very low aging quality, that would be someone who drinks budget wines, like college kids or something like that.
Oh, but I can tell you they didn't focus on budget wine drinkers. They specifically focused on a new segment. What was that new segment? You sort of said it, but can we try to elaborate on that? Yeah. I mean, not just doesn't have to be just you, but you were pretty much there, but I wanted to bring
yeah,
some
I think like maybe people they use different alcoholic, but not necessarily wine, maybe beer drinker, because like those are young and they really try like different types of drink, and they don't really care about all this stuff about the quality of wine, like the age, like or the complementary. So.
Okay, exactly like that. I'll expand on that a little bit. They focus on a segment, creating a new segment, or carving out a new segment from the market of alcohol drinkers who were not currently drinking wine. So people who were already drinking alcohol, but were not drinking wine. Now, so this is very smart, right? Why is it so smart? Which is a bigger market? The market of wine drinkers or the market of alcohol drinkers who are not currently drinking wine?
Yes.
It's very rare.
I mean,
But here,
overall, let's say worldwide.
here definitely is beer. United States probably beer as well. France, now they're changing, but just to be wrong, more than beer.
Yeah, let's say worldwide.
Younger generation.
Worldwide, it's a huge difference, right? The wine market's a tiny subset of the total alcohol market. The total alcohol market is huge. Wine market is a small subset of that. So therefore, the superset of the alcohol market outside of wine is much bigger than the wine market by many magnitude. So, but of course, wine companies in this, at this time, the wine companies are not focusing on that segment. They're not focusing on moving people from beer. Okay, yeah. So let's look at alcohol drinkers who are not currently drinking wine. What are they drinking? Beer and cocktails.
I think that, well, that's actually an interesting point. Like worldwide, if you mentioned like wine is very, very small. Probably spirits is even much smaller. Well, I guess, unless you're talking about Russia, which is very, right? But I don't know. If you have to divide the alcohol drinkers, where most of the money goes to, probably going to be beer.
Okay, so why were these non-wine drinkers not drinking wine?
Price.
Or what was when they started talking to alcohol drinkers who were currently not drinking wine, what was the first most cited concern or reason why they weren't currently drinking wine? It wasn't price. Their friends were. It wasn't getting drunk faster.
Complexity.
Availability.
Is it to use?
Huh?
Is it to use? Is it to use? Like, is it to buy or is it to use?
This was a second, but number one was what?
Availability.
Complexity. Availability?
I think it's fun.
No, it was something very simple. The most simple you can imagine.
Different.
Cork.
No.
That's very simple.
Yeah. Too complex.
Or the
Most-
friends use it.
More simple.
They don't like it.
Can't find
They
glasses.
didn't like the
Taste.
They didn't like the taste. That was the first most commonly said. It was they didn't like the taste. What didn't they like? Why didn't they like the taste? What about it didn't they like?
It's not recreational. You drink beer, it's more like you drink Coke or Pepsi. But if you drink wine, then have that.
Okay, so they felt it was bitter.
Bitter.
It's adding to the one.
Really?
That's weird.
When I drank my first coffee, it was very bitter. My first beer was very bitter. When I got to wine, it was no longer bitter.
Yeah, so this is it. And this is why most wine companies don't focus on this market, because they don't really think that they can create a product that's going to be suitable to this market, because they already like the current product. So
There's another thing. They have a very big egos.
yeah, and invested in current product, right? So
It's a royal product. That's the way they actually look at it. So, what? Am I going to do wine for, like people who don't know how to appreciate wines?
So this created a very attractive segment for this company because they didn't care about it. So they said, we're going to create, the first thing they did was they created a wine, the taste of which was designed for beer or cocktail drinkers. So therefore much, let's say maybe generally sweeter than regular wine. And what was the second reason you mentioned already? The beer and cocktail drinkers didn't enjoy the wine shopping experience. It's too many choices, confusing, hard to read the label. They don't want to learn, they don't want to study, blah, blah, blah. So they created ease of selection with just 2 wines, one red and one white, and that's it. And then they also tried to make the shopping experience more fun with this whole fun and adventure shopping program. So what was the consequence of this for Yellowtail? So they're able to create a product that's actually higher value for their customers, but lower cost to produce. Why? Things like, the existing companies are spending time and money on producing the very detailed labels, above the line marketing, aging quality, vineyard prestige and legacy, wine complexity, and wine range. All of these things are either not interesting or actually deterrents to Yellowtail customers. So by either reducing or eliminating these factors, they drive down their costs tremendously versus competitor wine companies. But they provide a product that is considered by their customers higher value. So that's a blue ocean strategy, value innovation strategy. We become the cost leader and we provide a product that's more valued by our customers than the competitor products. But what's the problem with this strategy?
Question why can easily change their product lines to match what the other sell.
I mean, when we get to competitive advantage, we're going to see this strategy doesn't necessarily have long-term competitive advantage. And in fact, I think a lot of competitors, replicated some parts of this product.
That's a negro. That's a very famous Chile.
And then you go into the wine store, you see a lot of simple label products. But okay, but still, it was innovative strategy when it was developed. Now, this is I have a second example from the tech space. So this is the exact same type of diagram done for iPod. Now, when Apple entered the market for portable MP3 players, the existing factors of competition were compactness, weight, music quality, affordability, and battery life. Now, what does that mean? The market leaders at the time, like Rio, like Diamond with their Rio, were selling highly compact, meaning small, low weight, and okay quality, and inexpensive MP3 players.
You also have like Sony with their Walkman, not Walkman, but the DVD players.
Yeah, but
These were very popular, very niche ones because they were expensive.
yeah, Sony was a little late to this one, but which is interesting because they were very early in portable music. But Apple launched a big, heavy, expensive portable MP3 player and totally crushed the competition. So how did they do that? They did that by focusing on new factors of competition, which the competitors have been ignoring pretty much up until then, or not focused on enough. Storage space, PC connection, and music software. So this is actually a much more nuanced strategy than Yellowtail, because Apple also was able to execute this strategy because of the innovative business model, where they changed the entire factor competition in this market from selling hardware to selling hardware service and software integrated with iPod and iTunes. And this enabled them to target a new segment. So what was the segment that Apple targeted versus the segment that all the other guys were fighting for? All the other guys were fighting for which segment? The early adopter segment, who wanted small, light, cheap, portable music players, didn't care about interface, didn't care that much about PC connection because they're okay to do PC connection themselves. But Apple targeted the mainstream, early mainstream. So they totally blew out the competition, and actually because they had an innovative business model, they were able to block competition for quite a while, and still today own a dominant position in the space. So that's your blue ocean strategy in the tech space.
But they still have to start with some kind of early adopter.
I think they basically left the early adopter market to the Diamond Rio guys. They targeted people who were not necessarily early adopters of this technology, but who wanted to get their music in MP3. And what these people wanted the most, they wanted to put their whole music library at one place. And they didn't want to fiddle around with the menus on the device. They wanted an easy-to-use menu. And they also wanted integrated software so that they could create playlists and blah, 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 easily.
So what was the archetype of the early adopter back then? Are they, geeks guy who try to,
There were weird guys that didn't want, that basically just wanted to be able to carry music with them and didn't worry that it was difficult to get the music onto your computer and difficult to manipulate the MP3 player because the menus were taking companies and that Okay, so I also like everybody to think about tagline for their product. So tagline is, to me, it's a single phrase that encapsulates the way that your customer thinks about the product. It should be clear, strong, and authentic, describe your unique offering, and provide focus and differentiation. So if you think about the most successful products that you know, or most successful products in the last 30 years, they all have very simple, single phrase description of the way that customers experience the value in that product. So if you think about this for your product, this is great exercise to get more into the mind of customers. Now, our what I call 4 Ps marketing strategy. So, oops. Sudden break. Okay. Somebody kicked the. Oh, did somebody kick the plug or?
Yeah, that's it.
It's the. We need to start when we open the project. Wait, check on the. I mean, it's on, right? It's on. Oh, there it is.
Started to use the battery.
What?
How do you do with the battery? No, I'm just wondering if the battery is okay. To steer your cable.
you need batteries?
Huh? Change what? Right away. Huh? If you possibly. Not sure.
Why is the tagline of the Apple is saying and there's an Apple there? Can you explain it?
Oh wait.
It's not. It's
Okay, are we back?
Take any cable from here.
Oh, so that was just the projector?
Maybe I put your cables on.
Okay, there you go. Oh, okay, sorry. So there was, you had a question about the Apple tagline?
Yeah.
Think.
Think again.
Oh, you can't see the whole one, but it's think different.
I think there's
It's the only thing. You can only see things because of our video. But yeah, what about that? What's the meaning behind that?
it's the apple that falls on the
Yes,
head of
think different.
Newton's test. The original logo of Apple was like Newton sitting under the apple tree, and there was this apple falling on.
Oh, okay.
And then over the time, it becomes that apple.
But why what does think different mean? I mean, why did they pick that as a tagline for Apple?
Second, they created the whole new service that is very important.
About themselves. Like, think different? Who thinks different?
Young people, rebellious.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that's my interpretation of this. Like, Apple feels that their customer base thinks of themselves as thinking different, right? They're not like mindless sheep who buy IBM. I think this tagline came from the history of Apple versus IBM, where Apple was always positioning in the mind of customers that they're the opposite of IBM, where IBM customers think just like everybody else and buy IBM, and Apple customers think different and buy Apple. So I think actually there's another very I think subtle message in this tagline. Like, think different. Does it sound funny?
It's not very funny.
Does anything strike you about it?
Think differently.
It's ungrammatical also, right? Like, it should be think differently. But I think this is also not accidental. I don't think it's a mistake where they forgot to grammar check and so I think that's another subtle message in this tagline, which is rebellious, don't care about rules that much. Maybe grammatical errors are for losers. Who cares about that? Like, only IBM computer people care about that. Apple cares about creativity or something other than that. And so, yeah, and then you can see the same thing with Nike, like, just do it. I think where do you think that comes from?
Customer themselves.
I mean, their perception that their customer is very action-oriented, just.
From my perspective, I think that the lovely selling customer just buys.
Just buy.
Just buy.
And maybe appealing to customers that want to just do it, don't want to talk about it, don't want to think about it so much, more want results. And so I think although these phrases sound very simple, but I'm sure that there was a lot of time and effort that went into coming up with phrases like this. Okay, so our 4 Ps. So this is where so far we have been focusing on pretty much high level marketing strategy. This is where in this part of the plan now, we start to really look at where the rubber meets the road. How does it meet the road? So how do we execute on the marketing strategy we've developed so far and start putting into effect? So this is a pretty basic marketing execution plan, including the product. So product-focused elements of our marketing strategy. Meaning, what is the whole product, not just the core product? What are the, for example, styling, the safety, packaging, support warranty, service that we build around the product? Our pricing strategy. So when we get to the financial part of the plan, I'm going to talk in more detail about pricing strategy, but that's something we want to think about here. Our distribution strategy, which I'm also going to talk about in more detail tomorrow, and sales and promotion, which I'm also going to talk about in more detail tomorrow. But one key takeaway from this, you need to think carefully through each element of the marketing execution strategy. Make sure you understand how it fits together with the high-level strategy, and also how are you going to actually execute on the strategy. Like, for example, one thing investors might hit you on, like, let's say you're going to, your business plan shows that you're going to acquire a large number of customers over the course of the business plan. What is your support strategy in the marketing plan? If you require product support delivered by people, as you ramp up the product production, you're going to have to increase your support function. And if you're not automating the support function, how many people are you going to need to provide the support? If you haven't figured out what the support strategy is going to be, or if your support strategy is inconsistent with your product expansion strategy, then investors are going to pick up on that right away. And what's going to be the net effect of that is they're going to look at your financial forecast, and they're going to say, you know, you're growing a customer base like crazy, but you haven't expanded your spending on support by anywhere near the same amount. So how are you going to support all these new customers? Or if you are going to effectively support all these new customers, you're going to have to spend a lot more on support personnel than you have factored into your business plan and your financial plan, and therefore your valuation is way too high because you haven't taken account of the effect of these support costs on your cost base. So you really need to think through each aspect of the marketing strategy. How does it fit together into a complete strategy, and also how does it map to your financial plan? When we get to financial plan, we'll talk about this from the other direction, but you want to start thinking about that now. Okay, so this brings us to a natural break point in our material, and it's also 4:30, so it's time to take a break. So we will take a 20-minute break, and we'll resume at about 5 minutes to 5, and we're going to talk about how to deal with competition once it enters into our market. Okay, so for everybody on Zoom, we'll be taking a 20-minute break now, and we will be resuming again at 4:55. So we'll see you back there then. Okay, welcome back. Welcome back, everybody, including Zoom participants. So I'm going to talk now about what I call sustainable competitive advantage. And this is, I think, the trickiest problem that we face in the business plan so far. Why? Now we have gotten to the point in our business plan where we have an innovative product that solves a painful problem for customers. We have identified an attractive entry segment. We have executed a successful market entry strategy in that segment, where we have some initial traction. What's going to happen next? What's the next step? Or what's going to happen in a market like that? So where a new company, a startup company identifies an attractive market opportunity, launches into the market, and gets some initial traction. What do we know is going to happen next?
Isn't that obvious on the slide right here?
Yeah, sometimes I like to give like really obvious questions to make it easy for people who don't like to participate. Just read the slide. So the answer is, yeah, you know it. What is it?
Competition, competing.
Competitors will enter. This is the nature of business. Business is about, success at business is about beating the competition. So somebody is going to win the competition for this market opportunity that you have identified. Either it's going to be you or it's going to be somebody else. And which is more likely? It's going to be you or somebody else? Which is the most likely outcome? Startup company has identified this great new market opportunity and has got some initial traction. Is it most likely that that company will capture the most of the value in this market during its growth phase, or that somebody else will capture most of the value in this market in its growth phase? Somebody else. So in most cases, you're going to lose to the competition. I mean, it just makes sense because why? There's only one of you, and there's almost, there's a potentially limitless number of competitors. Now, however, that doesn't mean every startup's going to lose. So some small number of startups that move early to identify and capture early position in the new market will also capture most of the value in that market during the growth phase. The companies that make the most money in new market opportunities, they're not the first movers. So when I talk to startups about this, and they usually ask like, how are you going to win the competition in this market? What is going to enable you to win? And the most common answer I get is first mover advantage. But my view is there is no such thing as first mover advantage. There's only last mover advantage. The
60-hour work week.
But 60-hour work week, so we're going to work harder than everybody. We have the best team. We're going to work harder than everybody else. We're going to execute better than everybody else. But we will, as a startup, let's say as a nascently successful startup, we face competition from what I consider two important directions. The first direction is other startups. So as soon as there's a new market opportunity that's exploited by a startup, other entrepreneurs like yourself will see that your company is getting some traction in this market and will decide to challenge you. And those startups they'll work as hard as you. They'll have to, if you're working 60 hours, they'll work 65 hours. If you're working 65 hours, they'll work 70 hours. When they're working 200 hours a week, they'll work 201 hours a week. Are there 200 hours in a week? No, right?
No.
Impossible. But you see where I mean, right? Like other startups will also get really good people, and they will also work really hard, and they will also execute really well. And they may have an advantage because you might suffer from first mover disadvantage. So I believe that most first movers, actually the vast majority of first movers suffer from first mover disadvantage. Why? What causes first mover disadvantage?
You have to break the entry barrier.
Yes, you pay the pioneering cost as the first mover, but second, third, fourth, and fifth movers get the benefit from the work that you've done. So basically, it's like you find a treasure map, and then you publish. You spend a lot of time, money finding a treasure map, and then you publish the treasure map on the front page of the newspaper, and everybody for now on the front page of the internet. So, and everybody rushes to the same treasure as you, and you were the one that had to invest in it. So, therefore, being first mover in itself is not an advantage. Being first mover is generally a disadvantage. Being last mover can come with significant advantages. What does it mean to be last mover? Last mover is a company that captures the majority of the value in the market during its growth phase. Because remember, we looked at our we looked at our market curve it looks like this: flat, exponential growth, leveling off. Yeah. Inflection point, exponential growth, leveling off. So the companies that make the most money are the ones that own the market at the inflection point and through the exponential growth phase. This is what I call last mover. But the companies who are first movers don't get much or anything unless they are a first mover who is also able to become the last mover. So some first movers are also last movers.
Uber. Like Uber.
Like Uber, and like a couple of other examples we're going to go through. But if you can be both the first mover and last mover, then you can do incredibly well. But moving first in and of itself does not create advantage. In fact, moving first in and of itself can put you in a very disadvantageous position. So I mentioned there are two potential sources of competition. One is other startups like yourself. Except that they don't suffer from first mover disadvantage because they wait 6 months. They let you open the market and then they leapfrog you with the next generation of the product and leverage on all the work that you've done. That's problem one. But that's challenge one. But this may not be the most difficult challenge. The most difficult challenge may come from established companies who do the same thing. So established large players who watch startups to see new market opportunities and then move in with all the benefits that large players have. The better brand, the more people, effectively unlimited funding, and complementary assets. So you see this happen all the time. Startup opens up a new market and Google captures all the value, or Microsoft captures all the value, or Facebook captures all the value, or X company captures all the value. So we don't want to shy away from moving first, but we want to move first with a strategy that enables us to also be last mover. Now, how is that going to happen? One is, first is, hopefully, we have a innovation, because when we have innovative product or business model, each of these gives us a technological lead, and in fact may create some sustainable barriers to entry for followers, which will enable our first mover to also become the last mover. And this is why in the first section, I focus so much on innovation, why you should have an innovative product or business model. It's not solely for the sake of innovation, but also in the benefit that this gives you when you need to create sustainable competitive advantage, because innovative products and business models can lead to sustainable competitive advantage. Okay, so in case you don't buy the first mover disadvantage, let's do some examples. Who was the first company to release a commercially successful personal computer, home personal computer? Who was first mover? Who's first mover in home computers? No, come back.
IBM.
Not
Apple.
no,
Dell.
not Dell.
No, HP.
Not HP.
No. Lenovo is
Not
not
Lenovo.
Lenovo. There was IBM. Atari.
Not Atari.
Apple.
Not Apple.
KFC. Xerox.
Not Xerox.
No Xerox. Ooh.
Okay, we'll let you think about that for a little while. But, okay, it was Altair.
What?
Altair, 1975. Altair was the first company was the first mover in personal computers. And this was a huge advantage for them, correct? Did you ever hear of Altair? Nobody.
Only my parents.
Yeah, I mean, no, don't worry. I have done this. I've asked this question thousands and thousands of people when I do this subject. I think there have maybe been out of like 5,000 people, there's maybe 5 that have heard of Altair because they're computer geeks from way back or computer science or something. But nobody ever heard of Altair. And yet Altair was the first mover in personal computer. And who launched the first mainstream product was Apple. And who captured most of the value during the growth phase was IBM. So you see the first mover, second mover, both failed in personal computers. Meaning first mover failed completely, second mover sort of failed, and third mover was the last mover. No, not exactly last, because we know IBM exited their PC business recently, the last couple of years. But okay, so personal computer was Altair. Who was the first company to launch commercially viable computer spreadsheet software? Computer spreadsheet software.
Was it IBM?
Not IBM.
Like more of a question.
Should be that company. Apple?
Not Apple.
No.
And nobody knows, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't, if you're thinking it was Lotus, it wasn't Lotus.
You know what Lotus is?
Yes, you didn't remember Lotus, who was the second mover, but who was the first mover was, in computer spreadsheet software, was BusyCal. Okay, BusyCal. Another failed first mover, BusyCal. So, and nobody ever heard of BusyCal either, right? So, who was the first mover in PC operating systems?
Actually, I think that was Apple. No, well, that's not
Microsoft. And who's the leader in PC operating systems today? Microsoft. So here we see 3 very similar.
They stole it from Apple. That was one of the big cases in the late 70s, early 80s. But Apple said that Microsoft stole that from them.
I think Microsoft stole about
I think
there was all Windows.
this is way before Windows. This was DOS. There were some issues around DOS because Microsoft did not develop DOS from scratch. They either licensed some software from another company that developed the original DOS. But the bottom line is, PC hardware, the first mover, nobody in our room ever heard of, and only 5 people in the whole world ever heard of. The first mover in PC spreadsheet software, nobody ever heard of. The first mover in PC operating system is still the market leader today, more than 40 years later. So they were able to become, Microsoft was able to become last mover after being first mover. But in PC hardware and spreadsheet software, no. Why? What's the difference? What's the fundamental difference between PC hardware, PC software, and PC operating system? Why is it that the first mover in PC operating system was able to become last mover, but software and hardware were not?
I think because the hardware is visible, easy to copy. The software, nobody know inside how to do it. So it's
But how about spreadsheet software also? Nothing, right? The first mover in spreadsheet software also nothing.
the barrier of entry.
What's the barrier of entry?
People develop software based on that operating system, so we can't switch the operating system.
Yes, so this is something called network externalities. In PC hardware and in PC spreadsheet, there are very low barriers to entry to followers. So pretty much anybody could create PC hardware and anybody could create PC spreadsheet. once somebody established that this was an interesting market. But in the PC operating system market, it wasn't the case. Why? So if you think about what drives buying decisions in the PC operating system market in 1970s. So if you think about the early market for operating systems, the market was fragmented. There were multiple operating systems. Each computer came with its own operating system or might come with its own type of operating system. So if you were a computer operating system buyer, meaning somebody purchasing a PC with an operating system, what were the factors that you considered when deciding which operating system to buy? What was the main factor?
Compatibility.
Compatibility of
The software.
availability of compatible software. So this means that Microsoft, by establishing an early lead in PC operating systems through a contract that they made with IBM to include DOS on all IBM computers, created a network externality in software development. So what does that mean? As soon as I establish a small lead in PC operating systems, this causes software developers to start to develop more software for my operating system. This sells more operating systems. This causes more software developers to develop software for my operating system, which drives the sale of more operating systems. So this circularity creates a very powerful barrier to entry for followers, which still, almost exists in the present day. And in fact, this strategy was replicated almost word for word, or measure for measure by Apple with App Store. So by launching the first smartphone with an App Store, Apple therefore encouraged software app developers to write apps for iPhone, which sold more iPhones, which caused more apps to be developed, which sold more smartphones. So this is why you see Apple also, with that business model, able to create a tremendous growth and market share and convert they weren't first mover in smartphones at all, but they were last mover. And especially now that Samsung has exploding Galaxy Note 7s and has to remove from the market. Anyway, but network externalities are a form of competitive strategy that creates barriers to entry. So first or early movers can create barriers to entry to followers and convert their early or first mover status into last mover status by two main routes. One is proprietary intellectual property. Two is competitive strategies that create barriers to entry. These competitive strategies generally fall into network effects or externalities or customer lock-in switching costs. So as a first or early mover into market who wants to become a last mover or whose successful strategy is based on becoming a last mover, we must have both of these in our business plan. We need to have proprietary intellectual property and we need to have competitive strategies that create barriers to entry. If we don't have either of these or both of these, then investors are going to ask a question like this. They're going to ask one of two questions. Why can't anybody just do this? Why can't anybody just do what you're proposing to do? Or, that's question one. Question two is, why can't Google, Facebook, Apple, whoever big potential competitors are in your market, why can't they just do this? And if the answer is not convincing, then there'll be no investment. Because why? If anybody can do this, why would I want to invest in one company that's trying to do it? If anybody can do it, then there's no way to predict who's going to win. And if Apple or Facebook or Google can actually successfully do this, then definitely we don't want to invest in this company because Apple and Facebook and Google are going to win. Now, they don't win every time. So we saw some cases where companies have outcompeted the big guys, but that's because they have some way to create barriers to entry. And you need to have this question. I think is so important that I usually like to see more than one barrier to entry. And I like to see them on both sides of this equation: proprietary intellectual property and competitive strategies that create barriers to entry. Now,
Hold on, but if Google wants to build something like Uber, can it do it? I think it can do it pretty well.
okay, so let's think about Uber for a minute. Like, what type of barrier to entry does Uber have? In the Uber business model, what is the main barrier to entry? It's network externality again. So what do I mean by that? And how do you choose which taxi app to call, which ride-sharing app to call? What's the first and most important consideration in Vietnam? I mean, in general.
How many cars do they have in my city?
Can I get it? How long does it take me to get a car? How many cars are available? And then, therefore, riders will choose the ride-sharing app that has the most riders. If I'm a driver, what's my primary consideration in choosing a ride-sharing app? Which ride-sharing app has the most riders? Because I want to make the most money. So by establishing an early lead in both riders and drivers, it creates a very powerful barrier to competition. This is why you don't see hundreds, dozens or scores or hundreds of successful ride-sharing companies. You see a handful, because the ones that establish early leads are able to block competition. We saw, okay, let's look at another example. Google couldn't beat Facebook in their social network, although they tried, right? Why? Because Facebook has a slightly different advantage, which we call network effect. Network effect and network externalities are related, but slightly different. Like, okay, messaging app. What messaging app are you using? So how many people are using either Line or WhatsApp or Viber or Facebook Messenger or Zalo? Everybody, right? How many are using something else? Nobody. Why? How did you choose your messaging app?
Your friends on it.
How did your friends choose?
Their friends on
How did their friends choose? Yeah, so this is what's called network effect. The value of a messaging app goes up exponentially with each new user. And therefore, the value of competing messaging apps goes down because they have fewer users. So let's say I launch my new messaging app now, and I try to encourage you to join, and none of your friends are on my messaging app. Are you interested? No. Now, of course, these advantages don't last forever. So, for example, maybe 5 years ago or 4 years ago, you're using something different. So the barriers are not are not permanent, but they don't need to be. They just need to be in place long enough for us to build reasonable degree of sustainable competitive advantage to get us to the growth rates. So behind every successful company, you're going to see some of these barriers to entry. These are more examples of failed first movers, in case you thought I just cherry-picked my examples. There are many, many other examples besides these.
What's the first species? The American.
First VCs?
The U.S.
No, first VC is in the U.S.
1960s.
Yeah.
70s.
I think 60s,
67 or 76.
some early, I think 60s or some early VCs. But I think, I'm not sure if first VCs are still around, but there's probably some advantage to early VCs, to moving early in the market as a VC, because also network is very important. So in markets where network is important, early building of the network can use barrier to entry follow. Now, these are some other barriers to entry that help first movers become last movers. Now, you notice I have highlighted some of these barriers in yellow, which means that they are available to startups. There are first mover advantages that are available to startups. When we're not a startup and we move first into market, we can benefit from things like reputation, but we can't do that as startups. So I have highlighted the ones here which are accessible to startups, and also more detail on the disadvantages of being a first mover. Okay, so we looked at network effects, also switching costs and customer lock-in. So the more difficult it is for customers to switch from our product, the better opportunity we have to go from successful first mover to last mover. This is why you see companies employ strategies like subscription. Subscription creates switching costs. Other forms of switching costs come from proprietary file formats or using a proprietary file format. Like, you notice Apple doesn't use MP3 format for their music or their movies. They don't use the standard formats. They use proprietary formats. Why? Switching costs or customer lock-in. It's not that easy to transfer purchases to a different file format. You can do it. There's software available that's do it, but it's not easily accessible for the average customer. So we want to build in switching costs, customer lock-in. We want to leverage network effects, network externalities. Another strategy that we can use to turn a first mover status into last mover advantage, I call unique or favorable channel access. So unique or favorable channel access is another way that early movers can create advantage and barriers to entry for followers. What's an example of that? Let's look at coffee, coffee place. So although coffee market is a little different in Vietnam, well, what's the leading coffee chain here?
Highlands. Oh, Highland coffee store is about 150.
And who's number 2?
And
And then number 3.
the 3, I think, should be coffee house,
Yeah, so usually in most markets we see there's clear number 1 and 2, and then there's everybody else after that. So for example, like in Singapore, you have Starbucks is number 1, and Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf are number 2, and everybody else is nothing. So why is that? Like, what? No. This is
Number 2 or number 3?
This is perfect for sharing. So I'm glad that you asked this. Anybody else? Can anyone? Yeah. Oh, okay. Perfect. Anybody else? Still have some left? Perfect for sharing. How does this strategy work? When do most people, okay, in Vietnam we have some special coffee culture, right? But let's say in most markets, when do people buy coffee? When? Yeah. Morning. And what are they doing when they buy coffee? They're on their way to work. So in most markets, most coffee buying happens in the morning when people are on the way to work from home. So what the early movers in coffee market do, they identify the locations in a particular city that are the #1 location to hit the most people in the morning when they exit a mass transit point on their way to the office. So you'll see, for example, again, like in Singapore, Starbucks, every single MRT station or busy bus stop that's near a place where people tend to work will have a Starbucks on the direct route in between those two locations. And sometimes you might see like 2 Starbucks on the same opposite side of the street that look like they're competing with each other, but it's not. They're there because this is a very high throughput area. The Starbucks wants to grab all those people. And then so it's something like 200 plus Starbucks already in Singapore. Almost every one of those is located in a prime spot. So it's basically the company sits down with a map and says, where are all the tier 1 locations to put coffee place? And then we get those locations. And then the second guy comes in, and what do? They take the second best locations. And then by the time the third guy comes in, there's nothing left. They're going into the third best locations where there's a huge drop off in channel. So this is a great example of unique or favorable channel access. We tie up the distribution channels and therefore we block followers.
How does that apply to software?
So it depends on the channel. It may or may not apply for every product in every category. So, but for example, when software was still sold in stores, then getting shelf space in the store can be a way to get favorable channel access.
Oh, also SEO, right?
Or
when you search for something.
Or no, another example can be like, let's say for example, you're creating payment software and you partner with Facebook, and therefore Facebook is your channel. Therefore, you have favorable channel access because Facebook has 1.3 billion users, or your payment software trying to go it on your own. So whoever gets that agreement, that partnership with Facebook, they win. And everybody else doesn't because they don't have favorable channel access. Other examples of favorable channel access, besides coffee, outdoor advertising. Outdoor advertising is usually dominated by a few companies in every market. Why? Because the exact same strategy. They have identified where are the best places to put outdoor advertising displays. Again, they're very limited. They're places where a lot of people are walking by and have time to look. So companies will usually tie up these locations on a long-term basis, and they can't get all, so #2 also gets good ones, but everybody else is left. And another one is razor blades. So you don't see very many competitors in the razor blade space. You see very small number of companies dominating the space. Why? One reason is channel access, because there's only a few places where people go to buy these blades, and the early movers tie up the shelf space in the store and block followers from getting distribution. But actually, razor blade is also an example for if we look at Gillette, where they have done very successfully favorable channel access. Can you remember the last time you went into a convenience store or pharmacy or supermarket that sold razor blades that didn't have Gillette? They're in every distribution channel, but they also have tremendous IP strategy. So, the Gillette Fusion razor? You know how many patents Gillette has on that razor?
The Fusion,
the Fusion razor system. 70 patents just on that one razor system alone. So they combine patent with a very effective business model with favorable channel access. Gillette was the first mover in disposable blades and still market leader today. Why? Because they have very effective strategies to create barriers to entry for followers, both IP strategy and competitive strategies that raise entry barriers. Favorable access to inputs is the reverse. So the same way we can dominate distribution channels, we can also dominate supply chain. So assuming that there is, for example, a limited supply of valuable inputs for our product, if we can get unique or favorable access to those inputs, it makes it much more difficult to follow. Like, for example, Apple with iTunes, where Apple went and created agreements with large music publishers before they launch iTunes to try to make sure that they have the best music catalog and very difficult for somebody else to come in and copy them. Now again, it doesn't last forever, but it can be very powerful. And then institutional barriers like IP protection, which we'll talk about a little more in a minute, and also things like regulatory approvals, licenses. If the government issues or regulatory bodies or approval bodies issue licenses or approvals in a limited quantity, whoever gets those first has a barrier to entry for followers, because the next guy, either at some point, limited number of licenses means competitors will not be able to obtain a license or approval. Let's say an approval process takes a long period of time. Like, for example, for pharmaceutical drugs. Pharmaceutical drugs go through years of approval process. So let's say once a company is 6 years into an 8-year approval process, they will have a tremendous lead on followers, because followers have to go through the exact same process. So they're 6 years ahead no matter what. This is one of the reasons that those type of startups can be extremely valuable without revenues. And, okay, IP strategy. So, intellectual property. Now, intellectual property brings us to the concept of stealing ideas. So, is it possible for somebody to steal your idea?
Yeah.
Yeah, who thinks it's possible for somebody to steal their idea? Okay.
It's always possible.
No, it's totally impossible for somebody to steal your idea.
The idea, yes.
No,
The idea means nothing. That's the point.
nobody can ever steal your idea. Why?
You just copy it. Like in the beginning, it is like something like a spot. Then it copy the spot, but after that, it will develop in different way. So only the one who creates the idea from the beginning can know what should it leads to.
I mean, that's one reason, but I have a more fundamental reason. Nobody can ever steal your idea, because what?
Nobody owns it.
You don't own your idea. Nobody can steal something that doesn't belong to anyone. Ideas don't belong to anyone. There's nothing.
Ideas are diaries.
And ideas are public property. Ideas are public property. Nobody can steal public property. Okay, so you don't own your idea. This is one of the reasons that ideas are not worth that much. But what is the intellectual property? Intellectual property is your idea converted into property. So if you have an idea, you can turn it into property. Property means it can be owned. Once something can be owned, it can be stolen. So somebody can steal your intellectual property, but they can't steal your idea. Therefore, if you have a valuable idea, you may want to turn it into intellectual property so that somebody can steal it. Now, why do we want to put our idea into a form that somebody can steal? Because it also means once we have converted it into a form that somebody can steal, we can now protect it because we own it. Now, this is the value in intellectual property. So I always tell entrepreneurs, stop worrying about people stealing your idea, because they can't, because you don't own it. But if you have a really valuable idea, convert it to intellectual property. How do we do that? We have 4 ways to convert ideas into intellectual property: patents, copyrights, trademarks, and trade secrets. So patents protect what?
The architecture, of the product,
Okay,
how it works.
what's that?
High level description how it works.
Okay, and more, that's good, but more specifically, what? Patents protect
Products.
inventions. If we have an invention, then we can potentially patent it. Inventions need to meet certain tests to be patentable. So they have to be useful, they have to be non-obvious, and they have to be innovative. So novel, sorry, not innovative. So they need to be novel, they need to be useful, they need to be non-obvious. If you have an invention that meets those tests, you can potentially patent it if nobody else has patented it already. So this can be very valuable. If you patent something, what does patenting something protect you against? Does it protect you against somebody producing the same product as you? No, it protects you against what? Somebody selling the same product or a product derived from your patent in the same market that you have patented in. So for example, let's say I patent my product in the US, but not in Vietnam. If somebody produces the product in Vietnam and violates my patent, I can't sue them. Actually, if they sell it in Vietnam, I can't sue them. But if they sell it in the US, I can't sue them. So should you patent your product? Or should you patent your invention?
Cost.
The costs at the moment are just, yeah, I think they're enormous.
It's around
This
50K.
way is looking into some of the things that I got the number, which is about $150,000.
Oh, somebody's definitely taking you for a ride.
No, I did my own
You can
calculation
do
based
it
on
for like
what is available. But the thing is, because I know
I
we charge,
can introduce you to much more, less expensive patent attorneys and
Okay.
good ones, because the cost should not, first of all, a lot of misunderstanding about patent costs. So patent cost is spread out over time. The initial filing of your patent is very inexpensive. You can do an initial filing for a few $1,000s. And you can even do, so you can do initial filing in one jurisdiction for probably less than $5,000. You can also do PCT application, very low cost. Most of the cost comes later, so 12 to 18 months later, when you have to do real filing in each country. But per country should be $50,000. If somebody's telling you it's $150,000 per country, you're good.
No. It's total, thinking about a different jurisdiction. So I want to file in the States, I want to file over here as well. Like 5 patents, something like this. So as you said, usually one patent is not good enough. So, there's different aspects. If you do it too high, it's a problem. So you want to,
Yeah. So definitely it's a decision we have to make. Like if the value of the patent is more than the cost to apply, then we should definitely do it. If the value of the patent is less than the cost to apply, then we shouldn't do it. But investment in patent, it's an investment. It's not just a cost. Because presumably the patent itself is valuable. Again, if it's not, we shouldn't pass it.
You're betting on the fact that it's going to be valuable.
What's that?
You're betting on the fact that it's going to be valuable.
So, correct. Like if you don't believe it's going to be valuable, then no point to patent. But if you do believe that it could be valuable and then the value is more than the cost, then it's strongly considered. But for most of now, but let's say that's one way to decide, but what else do we need to consider when deciding whether to patent?
Deciding whether to patent something.
Yeah, like what are other decision factors? Other important decision factor is when we do patent, we have to disclose exactly how we are achieving the result. So if by filing a patent and disclosing our method, we make it easy for somebody else to produce a similar result without violating our patent, we shouldn't do it. What does that mean? This is why you very rarely see software patents or algorithms patented. Because in many cases, if somebody who's good at writing algorithms looks at a patent for an algorithm, they can generate a similar result without violating the patent. But this is why we always see pharmaceutical drugs patented. Because seeing how the drug is produced does not give another company an advantage in producing a similar result at any less time or cost than the original time and cost in generating the result. Another thing that we usually don't patent are formula. And you see some classic examples of this, like the Coke formula, the KFC formula, never patented. Why? Because usually formula is very difficult to reverse engineer, but it's easy to work around if you see the patent. Example, like if somebody is, let's say somebody's trying to figure out the formula for KFC spices, and there's 13 spices and they're added in different proportions at different times, blah, blah, blah. It's very difficult to reverse engineer that from the spice itself. And therefore, once we publish the exact list of how we do this seasoning, it's very easy for somebody to copy and very difficult to patch them. How are you going to prove they violated the formula? If, for example, one of the key things in the formula is how long each process takes. Then how are you going to prove how much time is? So you have to look at both the value of the patent and also the opportunity we create for somebody else to not violate the patent, because actually if somebody violates the patent, now we can sue them, so that's okay. But we need to figure out how easy is it for somebody to work around the patent. If it's easy to work around, then don't publish. Then we keep as a trade secret. And you see most formulas, algorithms, software, etc., are protected as trade secrets. Now, to finish out the list, so patents protect inventions, copyrights protect what? Works, trademarks protect marks used in trade.
Brand.
So words or colors or logos that are associated with our brand. So what's the difference between patents, copyrights, trademarks, and trade secrets?
The form of the thing being recorded, the form of intellectual.
Oh, yeah, the forms are all different, but there is a fundamental difference between the first three and the last one.
That's the reason.
Chris not disclose.
Yeah, that's true, but what else?
There's no official process to.
Yeah, these first three are protection granted by statute. The last one is not. So trade secrets are not protected by law. Trade secrets are protected by contract. So we create, if we have a trade secret, we protect ourselves against the disclosure of trade secret by A, limiting the number of people that have access to it, and B, creating contracts with the people that do have access to it, so that if they disclose it, we can sue them. So most successful companies will utilize more than one IP strategy. So the company might have patents, plus copyright, plus trademark, plus trade secret in an ideal case, or they might have some subset of these.
But why did companies patent things that are hard to achieve? Like you said before, like why is it?
Oh, why patent something?
Like why patent something that is only hard to achieve, hard to reproduce?
No, what I'm saying is you should patent something that's difficult to work around. Yeah, meaning patent something that's difficult for others. Once they know how you did it, it's difficult for them to provide a similar result without violating the patent. If by disclosing how you accomplish the result, you make it easy for somebody to work around. Like this is the same thing with software. When we write software code. If we were to patent software code, if we somehow could patent software code, it would cover like the exact lines of code we use. But any skilled software developer can change one line. And they haven't violated the patent because they haven't copied all our lines, but they accomplished the same result. This is why also copyrights don't really protect software. Because again, switching around a few bits of code, a few subroutines or modules in the code doesn't violate the copyright, but makes it deliver a similar result. So yeah, IP strategy, definitely have to think about. And okay, sometimes like I'll hear companies say, we don't have any proprietary intellectual property. And they say almost proudly, you know, we don't have any proprietary intellectual property. And the way that I hear that is, I say, are you sure? And then, you know, say the way I hear that is, you don't know anything that everybody else doesn't know. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing that you know that everybody else doesn't know. If that's the case, how are you going to win? How are you going to beat everybody else? You don't know anything different from what they know. You don't have any proprietary knowledge. So you're going to win.
Connections, industry knowledge.
But if you have industry knowledge that others don't have, this is also proprietary intellectual property, right? And the network that you have is also something that you know that others don't know. So yeah, so when you think about intellectual property or proprietary intellectual property, don't get stuck on just patents. It's not all about patents. I like to think about it broadly as, what do you know that everybody else doesn't know? And you know, hopefully the answer to that is something, and it should be something pretty compelling. Because if the answer is nothing, like, then okay, let's say you don't know anything that nobody else knows. So how are you going to win? Maybe you're going to win. It doesn't mean you're not going to win, but how are you going to win?
Finding the thing that people don't know.
Yeah, but so okay, but think about that as an investment pitch. We're trying to raise money so we can find the thing that others don't know. You know what I mean? Then it's like, it's not very compelling because it's like investing in research. Okay, but okay, I think if you either are going to succeed, you know, without proprietary intellectual property, or believe that you're going to succeed, the reason is you will just out-execute everybody else. This is probably how it'll happen, but what percentage of startups think they're going to out-execute everybody else?
All of them.
All. And then of what percentage is this really true?
10.
Yeah, like vanishingly small, right? Because only in every market, in every product, only one company is going to really execute everybody else. So, however, you know, you can figure out the probability that that's going to be you by dividing, you know, 1 by the total number of participants in your market. And but how many people secretly believe that they're smarter than everybody else? No, how many people believe they're smarter than everybody else?
All of them. Not only everybody.
Everybody believes, right?
Yeah.
But of how many people can that be true?
It's very small.
Also, it's only 1, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, and then the probability that that's you is like 1 divided by the total number. So I think the problem with this line of argument is it's impossible to convince anyone of this in advance. In retrospect, it kind of turned out to, it may well turn out to be true, but in advance, nobody's going to do it. Okay, so tomorrow I'm going to continue to talk about competitor strategy. So I do have a couple more slides in this section, but I'm going to start tomorrow with those, and I'm also going to go through sales, channel strategy, sales and distribution. So, but I also want to have some time tomorrow for question and answer from you. So I want you guys to think about questions about what we have talked about so far, because by end of tomorrow we will have reached the end of the product market fit section of the course. So this would be a good time for you to start asking questions. Okay, so any questions now?
What kind of questions would you expect us to ask?
Interesting and exciting questions. Yeah, it's okay. I mean, just think about what we've had this way of gone over quite a bit of material already, so I'm sure you have questions about some of this stuff. Okay, all right, so thank you. Thank you on Zoom. We'll see you back here again tomorrow, 3 o'clock, same time, same channel, different Zoom number.